Today, we're diving into a really powerful story called The Prisoner Who Saw Jesus. Now, this narrative is specifically designed to push us, to make us confront a concept that a lot of people find, well, difficult to accept. We're talking about radical forgiveness. And the story just jumps right in. It immediately throws this question at us, a question that, let's be honest, many of us have probably wrestled with. Is there a line? An act so terrible, so monstrous that forgiveness is just off the table? It's a heavy one, for sure, and this entire story is built to put that idea to the test. So instead of just talking about this in the abstract, the story gives us a very specific test case, a killer. We're asked to look at this whole dilemma not as some philosophical puzzle, but through the eyes of someone who has, by all accounts, crossed that very line. Okay, so let's meet our central character. His name is Elias. And the story is really blunt about him from the get-go. This is a man that society has completely written off. As far as the world is concerned, he is beyond saving. We don't get all the gory details of his crimes, but we know he's a violent criminal. The story makes it crystal clear. He is feared for what he did, and he is hated for who he is. There's no gray area here. The narrative paints him as the definitive villain. And listen to how this is framed. He had done the unforgivable. That's not presented as someone's opinion. It's stated like a fact. A verdict has been reached. From any normal human point of view, his story is over. Case closed. So here he is, the night before his execution, and he's not sitting there feeling sorry for himself or looking for pity. No, he's broken, but he's also angry. It's this raw mix of defiance and utter despair. He knows what's coming, and he's not asking for peace. But right here, at his absolute lowest point, the story takes this sharp, totally unexpected turn. It introduces what it calls an impossible encounter. In the dead of night, in the dark of his cell, this peaceful, glowing figure just appears. The story is very direct. It identifies his visitor as Jesus Christ, and that sets up the ultimate confrontation. The man who embodies unforgivable sin face to face with the embodiment of unconditional love. Now, to really get what happens next, we have to understand this core idea the story is built on: unconditional forgiveness. It's not something you earn. It's a grace that's offered no matter what you've done. In fact, it's offered precisely because it can't be earned. And for anyone who's a bit skeptical, this right here is probably the toughest pill to swallow in the whole narrative. And this conversation just lays it all out. Look at this. Elias himself is making the case against forgiving him. He's yelling, "I don't deserve this. I've done evil." He's thinking in terms of justice, of cause and effect. But the visitor is using a completely different logic, saying, "I know, and I still came." The story places this offer of grace not just when he's down, but when he's at the absolute bottom, especially now. So what happens after this impossible dialogue? The story moves into its final part, and it's called Freedom Before Execution, which you have to admit sounds like a total contradiction. This basically maps out his transformation on the inside. He goes from that defiance and despair to confessing his own evil, and then somehow to accepting this offer of grace. The result, the story tells us, is a total shift. The fear and anger are replaced by peace. He's been freed from his mental prison, even though he's still physically locked up. And you can see this change on the outside, too. When the guards show up the next morning, they're not met by that angry, broken man from the night before. They find someone who is peaceful, smiling, even. His fear is just gone. And from their point of view, it makes absolutely zero sense. This story explains this whole paradox with this one key line. Chains can hold the body, but not a soul that has been set free. The argument it's making is that the real prison wasn't the one made of stone and iron. It was the one inside him, built from guilt and anger. And that's the prison he was just freed from. All right, so let's zoom out from the plot for a second and just look at the core message this story is trying to get across, what it calls its radical idea. So it really boils down to three main points. First, that nobody is truly beyond redemption. Second, that because of that, forgiveness is always on the table. And third, and this is probably the most challenging one, is that this kind of grace doesn't show up when we're at our best. It's found in our absolute darkest moments. Now, this is a really important distinction to make. The story isn't saying that forgiveness just wipes the slate clean. Elias's crimes are still real, and his execution is still going to happen. The point it's making is that the purpose of this forgiveness is to transform the person. It's about changing the prisoner, not changing the past. And so, the story leaves us with this final, really thought-provoking question. It's suggesting that forgiveness isn't some legal action that pardons a crime, but a spiritual one that sets a soul free. So if the goal isn't to erase what happened, but to liberate the person in the here and now, what does that say about the true power of forgiveness? That's the question the story wants us to think about.